My family kicked me out of my sister's wedding for driving a rusty truck. Look, I need to tell you about the day my family decided I was worth exactly nothing. Well, not nothing. A key. Just a single rust-spotted key that looked like it came from a hardware store clearance bin in 1987. I was 20 years old, sitting in some lawyer's office that smelled like old books and broken promises. The kind of place where the carpet is so worn you can see the pattern of every footstep that ever walked across it. My sister Ashley sat across from me, 22, and already dressed like she was interviewing for a corner office she didn't have yet. My parents flanked her like bodyguards. Me? I got the chair by the door, the one that wobbles. My grandfather had just died, the man who taught me that WD, 40 fixes, everything except a broken heart and a busted transmission. The lawyer, some guy named Richardson with a comb-over that defied physics, pulled out the will. Ashley got the first reading. Savings bonds, stock certificates, $50,000 earmarked for her future because she was, and I quote from the document, destined for great things in the business world. My mother actually teared up. My father clapped like Ashley had just won an Oscar. Then Richardson looked at me. He cleared his throat 3 times. That should have been my first warning. He slid an envelope across that massive oak desk, the kind of envelope you'd use for a birthday card from an aunt who forgot your name. Inside was a key. That's it. No note. No explanation. Just a key with a faded Ford logo and a tag that read farm, backfield. The silence in that room could have suffocated a small animal. My mother did this thing where she pressed her lips together so tight they disappeared. My father, Frank, started with a chuckle that grew into a full belly laugh that echoed off those pretentious wood panels. He actually had to wipe his eyes. Ashley pulled out her phone faster than a gunslinger in an old western. I heard the camera click. She was already typing before Richardson could explain what the key unlocked. But here's the thing nobody in that room knew except me and my dead grandfather. While Ashley was spending her weekends at the country club learning which fork to use for salad, I was in Grandpa's garage holding a flashlight while he rebuilt carburetors. While she was networking at college mixers, I was learning that the difference between a good weld and a garbage weld is patience, steady hands, and giving a damn about your work. Grandpa used to say something while we worked. He'd be elbow deep in an engine block, oil streaking his forearms, and he'd look at me with these eyes that had seen more than my 20 years could comprehend. He'd say Ashley knew how to count money, but I knew how to create it. From nothing, with my hands. He told me never to forget that. I thought I understood what he meant back then. I had no idea. Richardson finally composed himself enough to explain. The key belonged to a 1971 Ford Bronco sitting in the backfield of Grandpa's farm. My mother actually rolled her eyes, like physically rolled them in a complete circle. My father slapped the desk and declared that at least I could scrap it for maybe $500. Enough for beer money, he said. Everyone laughed. Even Richardson cracked a smile, probably relieved the tension had broken. Ashley posted that photo before we even left the parking lot. My brother the scrap metal millionaire. It got 47 likes. I counted. That stupid joke followed me for 3 decades. Every family gathering. Every holiday. Every time I dared to show my face, someone would ask about my inheritance. Ask if I'd scrapped it yet. Ask if that beer money lasted long. I learned to smile and nod. Learned to let them think they were funny. I drove out to the farm that same afternoon. The Bronco sat exactly where Grandpa said it would, listing slightly to the left in a field that had gone wild with weeds. The paint, what was left of it, had faded to a color that couldn't decide if it was brown or orange or just surrendered. Rust bloomed across the body like some kind of metal disease. The tires were flat. One window was cracked. A family of mice had built a civilization in the engine bay. It was, by every objective measure, a piece of junk. I sat in the driver's seat anyway. The springs poked through the upholstery. The steering wheel was sticky with age. And I cried like I hadn't cried since I was a kid who'd skinned his knee learning to ride a bike. Not because of the truck. Because Grandpa was gone. Because he was the only person who ever looked at me and saw something worth investing, and that wasn't a stock portfolio or a business degree. That's when I opened the glove compartment. Inside, folded around an old church program and 2 Burger King receipts from 1989, was a napkin, the paper kind that dissolves if you look at it wrong. Written in pencil, in Grandpa's shaky handwriting that got worse in his final years, was a note meant only for me. Mike, this truck has good bones. So, do you? People will judge you by how you look, not what's inside. Let them. What matters isn't what you start with. It's what you build. Don't let them break you. I read that note probably 200 times sitting in that field. The sun set. Mosquitoes ate me alive. I didn't care. Those words rewired something in my brain. They took 30 years to fully understand, but that day they planted something. A seed of defiance. A middle finger to everyone who thought I was the family disappointment. I had the Bronco towed to a storage unit. Cost me $150 I didn't have. I was working at a tire shop then, rotating wheels for minimum wage and dreaming of something more. I couldn't afford to restore it. Couldn't afford the parts. Couldn't afford the tools. Couldn't afford anything except the dream of one day proving that my grandfather's faith wasn't misplaced. So I learned. I didn't just become a mechanic. I became an artist in grease and steel. Worked my way up from tire rotation to brake jobs to full engine rebuilds, absorbing every certification until other master mechanics called me when they were stumped. I built a reputation in a world that respected skill over pedigree. Spent every spare dollar on tools from pawn shops and estate sales. Every spare hour sketching what that Bronco would become. And every single night, in whatever cramped apartment I could afford, I sketched. I planned. I designed what that Bronco would become, not a restoration. Anyone with money can restore something. I was going to build something that had never existed before. A restomod, taking the soul of a classic and giving it the heart of something modern. Something that would make grown men weep. The years crawled by like traffic on the 405. I was 30, then 35, then 40. Ashley climbed corporate ladders. Got married to some finance guy named Chad, who worked in Scottsdale, and wore watches that cost more than my annual salary. She'd post pictures from wine country, from ski resorts, from places I couldn't pronounce. My parents would share every single one. Look at our successful daughter, the post screamed. Look at what we raised. Nobody asked about me. I was just Mike, the guy who worked on cars, the one with the rusty inheritance. But in a garage I rented in a neighborhood where you didn't walk alone after dark, something was taking shape. I didn't just restore that Bronco. I reimagined it. I gave a new soul on a custom roadster shop frame. I gave a new heart. A supercharged Coyote V8 pushing 650 horsepower in a truck that left the factory with 165. I gave a suspension that cost more than Ashley's Maserati and brakes that could stop time itself. Every wire was hidden like it was going into a spacecraft. Every bolt torqued to specifications that would make engineers weep. The cherry black paint looked a foot deep, almost purple when light hit it right. I became obsessive. My girlfriend left me because I spent more time with the Bronco than with her. She wasn't wrong. My friend stopped calling because I never had time. I was possessed. I was building something that mattered. Something that would last. Something my grandfather would have understood. Ashley got engaged around year 25 of my obsession. Chad proposed on some yacht in the Mediterranean. The wedding was planned for Scottsdale. The invitation came on paper, so thick you could use it as body armor. Black tie optional. Destination wedding. Expected gift value not stated, but heavily implied to be substantial. And at the bottom, in Ashley's handwriting, a note, please arrive in something presentable. This is an upscale venue. I was 50 years old when I finished the Bronco. 3 decades since that lawyer's office. 3 decades since the key. 3 decades since my family decided I was worth nothing but a joke. The truck had been done for a month. I'd spent those weeks tuning it, driving at dawn on empty highways, feeling that supercharger whine burn away 30 years of doubt and mockery. I stood in my garage wondering what came next. Then the invitation arrived. Thick paper. Scottsdale. Black tie optional. Ashley and Chad's destination wedding at some upscale golf club. And at the bottom, in Ashley's handwriting, please arrive in something presentable. This is an upscale venue. I read that line sitting in my garage at 2 a.m, looked at the invitation, looked at the Bronco gleaming under the overhead lights, started laughing. The kind of laugh that comes from somewhere deep, somewhere that had been waiting 30 years. My hands were covered in calluses that had calluses, scars from grinding wheels and welding spatter, fingernails permanently stained with grease no soap could reach. I looked at those hands, looked at the truck, looked at the small fortune in parts receipts tacked to the wall. Ashley's Maserati cost $90,000. I had 3 times that wrapped in this machine. Something presentable, she wrote. I bought a Tom Ford suit, charcoal gray, tailored to fit like it was painted on. Cost me $4,000 and worth every penny. Italian leather shoes, Swiss watch. I cleaned up nice. Could have walked into any boardroom in America and looked like I belonged. The engine fired with that perfect mechanical symphony. That supercharger whine was like angels singing. The exhaust note set off car alarms 2 blocks away. I let it idle, feeling 30 years of family jokes dissolve in that sound. Grandpa was right. Good bones. I had them. This truck had them. We both just needed someone to believe in what was possible. I ran my hand along the Bronco's fender one more time, felt the perfect smoothness of that paint, felt 30 years of perseverance in every panel. This wasn't just a truck. This was proof. Proof that my grandfather knew what he was doing. Proof that value isn't determined by a balance sheet. Proof that the guy with the key was worth more than the girl with the stocks. I was ready to go to that wedding, not to celebrate Ashley, not to make peace with my family, but to show them, finally, undeniably, what they dismissed, what they'd mocked, what they'd spent 30 years treating like a punchline. The garage door rolled up. Morning sun hit, that cherry black paint, and it looked like liquid fire. I backed out slowly, savoring the moment. Neighbors came out of their houses, stood on their porches, stared. One guy actually pulled out his phone to take pictures. I shifted into drive and felt that supercharged V8 surge. 650 horses, ready to run. Good bones. Built right, ready for anything. Time to go see my family. The drive to Scottsdale took 6 hours. I had plenty of time to think about what I was doing. Plenty of time to turn around. Plenty of time to realize that showing up to your sister's wedding in a custom-built truck worth more than her condo was either the smartest or dumbest thing I'd ever done. I chose to believe it was smart. The resort appeared like a mirage in the desert. One of those places where the grass is too green to be natural, and the palm trees are spaced exactly 15 feet apart, like someone measured with a laser. The kind of place that has a valet stand and a dress code for the parking lot. I could see it from a quarter mile away, sitting there like a monument to people who thought money could buy taste. The parking lot was a car show for people who would never admit they were showing off. Bentleys, multiple Maseratis, a few Tesla Plaids, because even rich people want to feel environmentally conscious while spending $200,000. There was a Rolls Royce that probably cost more than my entire garage. A Lamborghini that looked like it had never seen a speed bump. And then there was me. I pulled into that parking lot like I owned the place. The Bronco's exhaust note bounced off the resort walls. Deep, angry, the kind of sound that makes your chest vibrate. That supercharger whine cut to the polite murmur of luxury car engines like a chainsaw through silk. 3 Porsche alarms went off simultaneously. I'm not exaggerating. 3. People turned. You could see the confusion on their faces. This was supposed to be a sanctuary from ordinary people and ordinary things. And here comes this cherry black truck that looked like it ate sports cars for breakfast. I parked between a white Bentley and a silver Maserati. The Bentley owner actually stopped mid-conversation with his wife to stare. His mouth hung open like I just landed a helicopter. The valet kids were frozen. Nobody knew what to do with a vintage truck at a place like this. One kid started walking toward me, then stopped, then started again like he was stuck in a loop. I stepped out of my Tom Ford suit. for $1,000 of tailored perfection. Italian shoes that cost more than the monthly payment on most cars. Swiss watch catching the Arizona sun. Hair styled. Beard trimmed. I looked like I'd stepped out of a magazine spread for men who close business deals over cigars. But they weren't looking at me. They were looking at the truck. I could hear the whispers starting. The guests were gathering near the entrance, pre-ceremony cocktails in hand. I caught fragments as I walked toward them. Someone said monster truck. Someone else said midlife crisis. A woman in a dress that probably cost 5 figures whispered to her husband about people who don't understand appropriate venues. Chad's groomsmen spotted me first. All of them looked like they'd been assembled from the same catalog. Perfect hair, perfect teeth, perfect watches. Finance guys who'd never changed their own oil and thought that made them sophisticated. They stood in a cluster, identical smirks forming on their identical faces. The tallest one, wearing a suit that probably required 3 fittings, pointed at the Bronco and said something to his friends. They all started laughing. The kind of laughing that's meant to be heard, meant to establish hierarchy, meant to let everyone know that something unacceptable had occurred. Chad himself walked over. The groom, the man of the hour, the genius who convinced my sister he was her ticket to the good life. He looked at me, looked at the truck, looked back at me like he was trying to solve a math problem and kept getting the wrong answer. He asked if I was lost. Said with this smile that wasn't a smile. Asked if maybe I confused this wedding with a tractor pull. His friends erupted, slapped him on the back. One of them doubled over laughing and had to wipe his eyes. That's when my father appeared. Frank, 68 years old and still built like the factory worker he'd been for 40 years. Face turning that particular shade of red that meant someone was about to get a lecture they'd never forget. He walked toward me with purpose, with fury, with 30 years of disappointment in his eyes. He didn't see the suit, didn't see the Italian shoes, didn't see the man I'd become. He saw that truck, that stupid rusty inheritance, that joke that just wouldn't die. To him, I was still 20 years old in that lawyer's office, still the son who disappointed him by not being Ashley. His voice carried across the parking lot. Asked me if I'd lost my mind, if I had any idea what I'd done, if I understood that this was supposed to be a classy event, and I just turned it into a circus. He called it that, a circus. Said I brought my rusty piece of junk to his daughter's wedding like it was something to be proud of. He still called it rusty. 30 years. 30 years of work. 30 years of every weekend, and every spare dollar, and every sacrifice. And he looked right past all of it. Looked through the custom frame, and the supercharged engine, and the suspension that cost more than his car. Saw only what he wanted to see. The joke, the disappointment, the son who would never measure up. People were gathering now. The audience was forming. Wedding guests with their champagne glasses and their judgment. My mother was there, trying to shrink into her expensive dress. Ashley's friends from her corporate job, all of them dressed like they were auditing the event for tax purposes. More Chad's finance buddies. Their faces lit up like this was the best entertainment they'd seen in years. My father kept going. Said he'd ask me for one thing. Just one thing. Not to embarrass the family. Said it wasn't that hard. Said normal people take an Uber to weddings. Said I always had to make everything about me. Had to be the center of attention. Had to prove something that nobody cared about proving. Then Ashley arrived. My sister. The golden child. The one who'd gotten $50,000 in stocks while I got a key. She looked perfect. Of course she looked perfect. Designer wedding dress that probably cost enough to feed a family for a year. Hair and makeup done by professionals who charge more per hour than I used to make in a week. She was a princess. The success story. The one who'd done everything right. And I just ruined her moment. She didn't yell. That would have been too crude for Ashley. She used that voice. The one she perfected in HR training. Calm. Measured. Devastating. Asked why I couldn't just be normal for one day. Why I had to show up in that thing. Why I always had to make everything difficult. Said she specifically asked me to arrive in something presentable. That word hung in the air. Presentable. I'd spent 3 years of evenings building that truck, had 3 times her Maserati's value sitting in that parking lot, was wearing a suit that cost more than her wedding dress. And I wasn't presentable. She said it was her day, her special day. Said I always did this, always found a way to steal attention. Said if I cared about her at all, I'd leave right now and let them enjoy the celebration without my drama. The friends around her nodded like backup singers. Yes, so true. Why would anyone do this? My father's voice rose again, told me to move the truck immediately, said to park it by the dumpsters where it belonged, where I wouldn't embarrass them further. Or better yet, just leave entirely. Go home. They didn't need my circus here. Nobody wanted it. Nobody wanted me. Though he didn't say that part out loud. Didn't need to. That's when I noticed the old man. He stood apart from the crowd. Late 60s, maybe early 70s. Dressed in a suit that was expensive but understated. The kind of expensive that doesn't need labels. He wasn't laughing with the others. Wasn't shaking his head in judgment. He was studying the Bronco. Really studying it. His eyes tracked along the custom grille. Paused at the brake calipers visible through the wheels. Followed the lines of the exhaust system. Professional interest. The kind of look a craftsman gives another craftsman's work. He caught me watching him. Our eyes met across the parking lot. He gave a small nod. Just barely perceptible. Recognition. Respect. It lasted maybe 3 seconds. Then my father was in front of me again, blocking my view. His face was purple now. Veins standing out on his neck. Spit flying as he told me to get that thing out of his sight. Said I'd humiliated them for the last time. Said I was 50 years old and still acting like a child who needed attention. Said the family had given up on me a long time ago, but he'd hoped I'd at least have enough decency to not ruin Ashley's wedding. The crowd around us had grown. 50 people, maybe more, all watching the family drama unfold, all judging, all forming their opinions about the weird guy who showed up to a golf club wedding in a truck. I could feel 30 years collapsing. Every family dinner where I was the joke. Every holiday where they asked about the rusty inheritance. Every time they compared me to Ashley and found me lacking. Every moment where I wasn't enough. Would never be enough. Could never be anything but the disappointment who got the key. My hands were shaking. Not from fear. From rage. From humiliation. From the realization that I'd driven 6 hours to prove something to people who would never see it. Never acknowledge it. Never admit they'd been wrong about me. Chad's friends were still laughing. Taking phone pictures now. Someone said this would make a great story at the reception. Someone else said they couldn't believe people like me still existed. Heard the phrase white trash. Heard someone whisper it like they thought I couldn't hear. Like I was supposed to absorb it and agree. Yes, that's what I am. That's all I'll ever be. Ashley was crying now. Real tears or performance tears. I couldn't tell anymore. Didn't matter. She was a victim. I was a villain. That's how this story would be told forever. The brother who ruined the wedding. The guy who couldn't let his sister have one perfect day. The embarrassment the family couldn't escape. My father grabbed my arm, told me to get in the truck and leave. Now, not a request. An order. The same tone he'd used when I was 10 years old and had tracked mud through the house. Leave. Go. Nobody wants you here. I pulled my arm away, looked at the crowd, at the judgment, at the disgust, at Chad's smirking friends, at my mother who wouldn't meet my eyes, at Ashley who looked at me like I was a stranger who'd crash her party, at my father who'd never seen me as anything but a disappointment. The old man who'd been studying my truck was gone. I couldn't see him anywhere in the crowd. I walked back to the Bronco. The valet kid scattered, gave me space like I was contagious. I climbed into the driver's seat. That hand-stitched leather, those custom gauges, that steering wheel I'd wrapped myself. Everything I'd built, everything I'd created, everything they couldn't see. I fired the engine. That V8 roared to life. That supercharger whined. That exhaust note that had taken me months to perfect echoed across the parking lot. It was beautiful, violent, perfect, and pointless. I backed out slowly, put in drive. The crowd parted like I was contaminated. Some were still laughing. Some were shaking their heads. Some were already turning away, dismissing me, moving on to more important things like whether the bar had top-shelf tequila. As I pulled away from the resort, I could see them in my mirrors, going back to their celebration, going back to their perfect day, going back to forgetting I existed except as a story. Did you hear what Ashley's brother did? Can you believe it? Some people just don't know their place. I drove, didn't know where, didn't care. The Arizona desert stretched out on both sides of the highway. Brown, empty, honest. I'd just been destroyed by the people who were supposed to love me. Had my life's work dismissed as a joke by people who wouldn't know craftsmanship if it ran them over. The Bronco hung beneath me. Perfect, powerful, everything I had promised Grandpa it would be. And nobody would ever see it. I kept driving, away from the resort, away from my family, away from 30 years of trying to prove I was worth something to people who'd already decided I wasn't. The fuel gauge showed 3/4 full. I could drive for hours. Maybe I would. Maybe I'd just keep driving until I ran out of desert or ran out of fight, whichever came first. The sun was setting, turning the sky orange and purple, beautiful and indifferent. I was 50 years old, alone, humiliated, carrying 3 decades of work that meant nothing to anyone who mattered. The highway stretched ahead, empty, endless. I took the next exit. The exit led to one of those gas stations that tries too hard. Circle K with a Starbucks inside and Tesla chargers in the parking lot. The kind of place that serves $12 sandwiches and calls them artisanal. I pulled up to a pump and just sat there, engine off, hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. 30 years. 30 years to build something perfect. 30 minutes to have it dismissed as trash. The math didn't work. The universe didn't work. Nothing worked. I should have scrapped it when I was 20. Taken that $500 for beer like my father suggested. Would have saved me 3 decades of wasted effort. Saved me from believing I could prove something to people who'd already made up their minds about me before I learned to drive. The desert sun hammered down on the hood. Heat waves rose off the asphalt. I watched them dance and thought about how fitting it was. Mirages. That's all this had ever been. The idea that hard work mattered, that skill mattered, that you could build something so undeniably excellent that even the people who hated you would have to acknowledge it. Stupid. Then I heard it. A horn. Not aggressive. Almost polite. I looked in the rearview mirror and my brain short-circuited. A Bentley Bentayga. Black. Pristine. The kind of SUV that costs more than most houses. It pulled up next to my pump. Just sat there. Engine running. The driver's window came down. Tinted glass sliding away to reveal the old man from the wedding, the one who'd been studying my truck, the one who'd nodded at me before my father blocked my view. He was smiling, not the polite smile people use at funerals. A real smile, the kind that reaches the eyes. He said he thought he'd never catch up, said he'd been following me since I left the resort, had to run 3 red lights, apologized to his wife, who I could now see in the passenger seat, looking amused. I asked if he was serious, if he'd really followed me. My voice sounded hollow, broken. 20 miles is a long way to chase a stranger. He said absolutely. Said when my father called my truck garbage, he knew there was nobody worth talking to at that wedding. Said Chad was his nephew. Said they were all idiots. Every single one. Then he asked very politely if I'd mind opening the hood. Said he'd driven 20 miles and would hate to have the curiosity kill him. I got out. Felt like I was moving underwater. Like reality had become negotiable. He stepped out of the Bentley. Moved like someone who spent time in gyms and took care of himself. His suit probably cost more than my Tom Ford, but you'd never know from looking. Quality doesn't shout. He walked around the Bronco first. Didn't touch. Just observed. Professional. His eyes tracked every detail. The custom grille, the body lines, the way the fenders flared just slightly, the perfect panel gaps. He stopped at the wheels, crouched down, looked at the brake calipers through the spokes. He asked if those were Brembo brakes. I said yes, all 4 corners. He whistled, Said that alone was $10,000 of stopping power. Said most people put those on Ferraris, not vintage trucks. I popped the hood. His reaction was worth the 20-mile drive. His eyes went wide. Actually wide. He moved closer, like he was approaching something sacred. Reached out to touch the valve covers, then stopped himself and asked permission. I nodded. He ran his hand across the illuminator block, traced the supercharger mounting, followed the custom headers. He asked if this was a Roadster shop frame. I said yes. He asked about the engine build. I told him. Coyote V8, illuminator block, Whipple supercharger, 650 horsepower. He did the math in his head. Said that engine alone cost what a new Mercedes goes for. Said the build quality looked better than what he'd seen at SEMA. Said the attention to detail was unreal. Then he told me who he was. Robert Harrison, collector, investor, regular at Barrett-Jackson auctions. Front row seats every year. Said Jay Leno called him for advice on acquisitions. Said he'd been around custom cars for 40 years. Said he'd seen Carroll Shelby work. Said he'd watched Chip Foose build masterpieces. Said this was better than most of what they produced. I didn't believe him. Couldn't believe him. This was the universe playing a joke. Had to be. The same day my family destroyed me, some random rich guy shows up to tell me I'm talented? The timing was too perfect. Too convenient. Too much like a movie. He walked around the truck again. Kept shaking his head. Kept muttering things like unbelievable and extraordinary, and how did you even? He asked how long it took. I told him 30 years. He stopped walking. Looked at me. Really looked at me. Said he could see every one of those years in the work. Said you can't fake that kind of dedication. Can't shortcut that kind of quality. Then he did something that broke my brain. He pulled out a checkbook. An actual physical checkbook. I didn't know people still carried those. He clicked a pen. Started writing. Asked for my name. I told him. Mike. He wrote it down. He said he wasn't going to negotiate. Said negotiating would be an insult to what I'd built. Said he could see 30 years of my life in this truck. Said he'd been collecting cars since before I was born, and he'd learned to recognize when something was priceless. Said this was one of those times. He wrote numbers. My eyes tried to track them. Couldn't focus. He tore the check out. Held it up so I could see. $2,200,000. I stopped breathing. He said it wasn't because the truck was worth that much on paper. Said it was worth that much because he wanted Chad to find out what the rusty piece of junk sold for. Wanted his idiot nephew to learn that value and price aren't the same thing. Wanted my father to know he dismissed something extraordinary. Wanted the whole wedding party to understand they just watched a masterpiece drive away. I took the check. Hands shaking. The paper felt too light. Too fragile. Too impossible. Those numbers. Those ridiculous numbers. More money than I had made in my entire life. More money than my father made in his entire career. More money than Ashley's stocks and bonds and corporate job combined. For a truck they'd mocked for 30 years. Harrison asked for the keys. I looked at the Bronco. My grandfather's gift. My life's work. 3 decades of nights and weekends. Every sacrifice. Every girlfriend who left. Every friend who stopped calling. Every family gathering where I was a joke. All of it sitting there in cherry black paint and supercharged perfection. I handed him the keys. He smiled, shook my hand. His grip was firm, respectful. He said my grandfather was right. Said the truck had good bones. Said I had better ones. Said he could tell from the work. Said anyone who could build something this perfect had the kind of character most people spend their whole lives looking for and never find. Then he climbed into my truck, into those hand-stitched seats, behind that custom steering wheel. He fired it up, that V8 roar, that supercharger whine. He revved it once, smiled like a kid on Christmas morning, waved at his wife to follow him, and drove away. I stood in that gas station parking lot, holding a check for $2.2 million, watching my life's work disappear down the highway. The Bentley followed, both vehicles getting smaller, the exhaust note fading. Gone. The desert was quiet again, just wind and heat and the hum of gas pumps. I looked at the check. Those numbers were still there, still real, still impossible. My phone buzzed. Probably my mother. Probably calling to tell me how disappointed they were, how I'd ruined everything, how I should apologize. I turned it off. Didn't want to hear it. Didn't need to hear it. Not anymore. I called an Uber. Waited 40 minutes in that parking lot. The driver showed up in a beat-up Honda. Didn't ask why I was standing alone at a gas station in a $4,000 suit. Drove me to the nearest bank. I deposited that check like I was depositing a rent payment. The teller's eyes went wide. Asked if I was sure. I said yes. She asked twice more. I said yes twice more. The money hit my account the next day. $2.2 million. From a joke. From a rusty piece of junk. From the inheritance nobody wanted. 6 months later, I stood in my new shop, Mike's Master Builds. 15,000 square feet in a nice part town. Climate controlled. Lift bays. Paint booth that cost more than my father's house. Tools that made my old collection look like toys. 3 employees. All of them master craftsmen. All of them artists. Harrison wasn't just a collector. He was an investor, a partner. He'd put money into the business, put his name behind it, brought me clients I'd never have reached on my own. Silicon Valley millionaires, tech founders, old money families, people who understood that custom work wasn't about speed. It was about perfection. And they paid for perfection, paid extremely well. I was building cars that would never see a traffic jam, building art that happened to have engines, building things that would outlive all of us. And I was making more money in a month than I used to make in a year. The universe had balanced. Finally, after 50 years. Then the news hit. Chad was a fraud. His hedge fund was a pyramid scheme. Had been for years. He'd been paying old investors with new investor money. Classic Ponzi. The whole thing collapsed overnight. Federal investigators. Frozen accounts. Criminal charges. He fled the country. Last anyone heard, he was somewhere in South America, drinking on a beach with no extradition treaty, living off money he'd hidden offshore. He left ruins. Companies destroyed. Retirements vaporized. Lives shattered. The guy my sister married. The genius my family worshipped. The man who was supposed to be their ticket to the upper class. Turned out he was just really good at lying. Ashley's face was on the news. Not because she did anything wrong. Because she was married to the monster. Her life imploded. Lost her job. Lost her reputation. Lost her condo when it turned out Chad had taken a second mortgage she didn't know about. Lost everything. But it got worse. My father, Frank, had believed in Chad. Really believed. Saw him as a son he'd never had. The successful one. The one who understood money. So when Chad offered him an opportunity to invest, to help the young couple, to be part of something bigger, Frank jumped. Took a second mortgage on the family home. The house he'd paid on for 40 years. Put it all with Chad. Every penny. Gone. My parents lost their house. The bank took it. Foreclosure. They'd lived there for 43 years. Raised their kids there. Hosted every holiday there. And it was gone. Because they trusted Chad. Because Ashley had vouched for him. Because they wanted so badly to be part of the success story. Ashley lost her condo for the same reason. Second mortgage. Chad's idea. She'd trusted him. Why wouldn't she? He was her husband. Her ticket. Her proof that she'd made it. She signed the papers without reading them. He'd told her it was a tax thing. She believed him. 3 months later, she was living with our parents. Except our parents didn't have a house anymore. I heard all of this from my mother's sister. My aunt, she called me crying. Said the family was devastated. Said they had nowhere to go. Said they'd asked about me. Asked if maybe I'd help. I told her I'd think about it. She said they were desperate. I said I'd think about it. She said they were family. I said I'd think about it. I thought about it for about 30 seconds. Then I went back to work. 3 weeks later, I was reviewing blueprints with client, tech founder, Wanted me to build him something based on a 1960s Mustang, but with modern everything. Money was no object. My favorite kind of client. We were discussing suspension geometry when I heard a car pull up outside. Old car, sick engine, bad exhaust. I looked through the bay door. Ford Focus, maybe 15 years old, dented, faded paint, one headlight dimmer than the other. It parked crooked, amateur parking job. 3 people got out. My father, my mother, Ashley. They looked smaller, older, worn. My father's shoulders were hunched. My mother's hair had gone almost completely gray. Ashley looked like she'd aged 10 years and 6 months. They stood in the parking lot, looking at my shop, at the sign, Mike's Master Builds, at the cars visible through bay doors, a Lamborghini getting a custom exhaust, a vintage Porsche getting a complete drivetrain swap. At me, I walked out, wiped my hands on a clean shop towel. I was wearing Dickies work clothes, clean but clearly used, had grease under my fingernails, had calluses on my palms, looked exactly like what I was, a guy who worked with his hands, a guy who built things, a guy who'd earned every dollar in his bank account. My father spoke first, said my name, Mike, like he was asking permission to continue, said something terrible had happened, said they had lost everything, said Chad had destroyed them, said they had nowhere to live, said they were desperate, asked if I'd help them, because we're family, because that's what families do, because surely I wouldn't let them end up on the street. Ashley was crying, real tears this time, said please, said she knew she'd messed up, said she knew I had money now, said she'd heard about the business, said surely I could spare something, anything, said we're family, said it again, we're family, like that magic word would undo 30 years. My mother just looked at me, didn't say anything, didn't need to. Her eyes said everything. Disappointment, shame, desperation. The same eyes that had watched me get a key instead of $50,000. The same eyes that had rolled when I said I'd restore the truck. The same eyes that had never seen me as anything but a disappointment. I looked at them, looked at the life they'd built, the life that had collapsed because they'd put their faith in appearance over substance, in pedigree over character, in stocks over skills. They'd lost everything betting on the wrong horse, on the golden child, on the success story, on everything except me. I pulled my keys from my pocket, walked past them, didn't say a word, headed toward my personal vehicle, parked in the shop owner's spot, black Rolls-Royce Cullinan, $400,000 of British luxury, custom ordered, hand-built, the kind of car that makes people stop and stare. I opened the door, paused, looked back at my father, made eye contact, let him see who I'd become, let him see what his joke had built, let him see the truth he'd spent 30 years avoiding. I told him I'd thought about a suggestion, about taking that rusty inheritance and scrapping it for $500 for beer money. Remember that? Remember the laugh? Remember how funny everyone thought it was? I told him I didn't need beer money anymore, but it looked like he did. I got in the Cullinan, closed the door, that solid thunk of engineering, started the engine, that whisper-quiet V12, pulled away from my shop, from my success, from my family standing in the parking lot with their hands out and their pride in ruins. I didn't look back.